I find it funny when nautical trends are predicted for summer because it's truly one of those timeless looks that comes back decade after decade and even century. I always say that understanding the history of fashion is crucial to developing your own personal style. So with the summer swelter upon us here in New York City, I decided it was the perfect time to dive into the fascinating history of nautical fashion. Hi, I'm Allie. I'm a New York City artist with a passion for fashion and pop culture who yaps too much for short form video, so thank you for being here for my YouTube debut. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. The sailor's uniform up into the early 19th century was often made by the sailor who wore it. During voyages that could last years, sailors would become very experienced in a variety of skills, including sewing. Their outfits would be practical, like loose-fitting trousers, natural fiber shirt, and sturdy boots. But in contrast, they also had going ashore clothes that were often decorated with embroidered nautical motifs like stars and anchors. It's around the mid-1800s when we start to see a consistent naval uniform finally implemented. Elements from this uniform include the iconic flat collar and black necktie that most modern-day navies still use. The square collar is often incorrectly referred to as a tar flap, but it was never actually used to protect the wearer from tarred hair. These sailors, who were often working class men, were exposed to so many different elements on the seas, so this collar was often used for extra protection from those elements, and the black necktie that we still see in many uniforms today were used to help keep it open for some airflow and also wiping sweat. It was around 1840 when the nautical aesthetic had its first true fashion moment. A portrait of Queen Victoria's 4-year-old son, Prince Edward Albert, was released, showing him wearing an exact replica of a Navy uniform. In the late 1850s, the French Navy uniform adopted the Breton stripe. The design featured 21 stripes, each one representing one of Napoleon's victories. But it was also introduced for its practicality, because when someone fell overboard, it was a lot easier to see them in the water with their white and black striped shirt on. As we enter the 1900s, we see a lot of naval uniform influence in women's workwear, but we also see it in high fashion. Technology advancements in the late 1800s made leisure travel by sea more popular and accessible. And interestingly, one of the most iconic looks from the Titanic movie was inspired by an actual outfit in the 1912 issue of Le Mode's magazine. It was Coco Chanel who included the Breton stripe in her 1917 collection that truly catapulted the nautical aesthetic into mainstream. It's also a really interesting example of trickle-up fashion, which is not typically the direction that trends will go. Bringing the stripe from the sea to the fashion world by such an icon made nautical elements a symbol for casual elegance.
Swimsuit with a jersey wrap for the boardwalk. And here's the jersey beach costume, the sandy hook. Sailcloth winding skirt with a halter. Sailor suit for over the bounding main. 2 tailored suits, a corduroy coat, and a black piqué suit with a dotted swift blouse for afternoon wear.
Of course, we're also seeing the classic flap collar and necktie being included in summer fashion and everyday women's fashion.
And the Atlantic, but the Atlantic isn't romantic, and the Pacific isn't what it's cracked up to be. We owe the Navy an awful lot.
I'm putting all my eggs in one basket.
In the 1930s and mid-century in general, we see Hollywood really run with the nautical style. Considering this time in history, at least in America, the nationalism is really building, and we see the effects on everyday fashion.
In Washington, the WAC stage a fashion show, styled not by Schiaparelli, but by the Research and Development Branch of the Quartermaster Corps. An Army nurse shows regulation togs for the icicle climates. Tailored of warm wool, this outfit includes a fur-lined helmet and mittens. nurses' overseas uniforms. On the right, the trim seersucker duty uniform, and with the jacket left, it's a smart street outfit. Newest fashions for the best dressed women in the world.
The post-war revival of the classic nautical look introduced new trends like the trouser short and capris, as well as dresses and matching sets. We of course are still seeing the Breton stripe on celebrities like Pablo Picasso and Grace Kelly. But another major turning point was when Yves Saint Laurent opened his 1962 fashion show with the peacoat. Gabrielle Chanel gave women freedom. Yves Saint Laurent gave them power. This peacoat was the first piece he presented under his own name. The straightforward design of this practical garment played a pivotal role in shaping the feminine silhouette. Its loose fit and hip-length coverage made it an ideal choice for women who, at the time, might not have felt bold enough to wear pants, emphasizing a style that gracefully navigated the contours of the female form. And in the 60s, we also see the mod aesthetics interpretation of nautical elements, which I think is really cute and reminiscent of the early 2010s twee aesthetic. I want to share this incredible collection by Marc Bohan for Christian Dior Spring-Summer 1978. It reminds me of our current day fascination with cottagecore and prairie dresses, which come from the 1970s and are arguably a more modest style of dress, even if you are not a modest person. And in the same way, this 1978 collection, which calls back to the early 1900s, 1910s, are a more conservative way to wear the nautical fashion trend. If I were to draw a diagram of the nautical history tree, we would have branches that shoot off from Coco Chanel's Breton stripe as well as Yves Saint Laurent's peacoat. But I think another one that is incredibly important to modern day nautical wear or leisure wear or resort wear would be Ralph Lauren. Like Coco Chanel, Ralph Lauren really marketed his brand and aesthetic towards people who could leisure by the sea, who spent their summers on boats, and really pushed a lifestyle narrative with his clothing. In the 1980s, we see power dressing become one of the main trends of the decade, and no matter what aesthetic you fell into, the silhouettes were bigger and bolder and chunkier and longer and exaggerated. Here we see Princess Diana wearing this iconic red nautical look in 1989. The 90s are interesting because the first half of the decade, you see a lot of those exaggerated power dressing silhouettes from the 80s, though they are starting to become a little bit more minimal. But as we reach the end of the decade, we enter what I think is an exciting development, another branch of the nautical history tree, which is Abercrombie & Fitch. Listen, I know that Abercrombie & Fitch is probably considered preppy to most people and not nautical, but let me tell you why I think this is a critical moment in nautical fashion history, as well as fashion history in general as we look at the early aughts. The way Coco Chanel took the working class Breton stripe shirt and marketed it as something that the cool kids could wear was very similar to the way Abercrombie & Fitch operated. They were selling a lifestyle, and that lifestyle was very exclusive, and you could only enter it if you were thin, good looking, and probably white. Abercrombie really had a death grip on the early aughts, so as we get to the end of that decade and the beginning of the 2010s, if we're looking at high fashion, the elements that we see featured are blazers still, but they're cropped and angular. We see a lot of striped tees and longer sleeve swimwear, and we also see a lot of calls to that classic 1900s style that Marc Bohan called to in his 1978 Christian Dior collection. Trends used to run on a 10, 20, or 40-year cycle, but because of social media and TikTok especially, the trend cycles have sped up so much so that there are times when major retailers finally get a piece and it's not even in fashion anymore. I also find that a lot of people around my age, millennials, are entering a new stage in life where they are having kids or their bodies are changing, and the clothes that used to make them feel the best about themselves don't anymore, and they just default to it anyway because they don't know what to do next. The reason why I think it's important to understand fashion history, to a certain degree, you don't need to become an expert, but understanding the history of certain trends can help you incorporate it into your own style the way you feel most comfortable. I feel like there's a renaissance for a lot of mainstream retailers that were popular in the 2010s or even in the 80s and 90s. Gap, which I won't talk much about because I don't see a lot of nautical elements, is having their renaissance with Zach Posen as the new creative director, but also J. Crew is doing really amazing, new, fun, interesting pieces, as well as this capsule collection of nautical pieces, which is where this sweater is from. As I wrap up my abridged version of the history of nautical fashion, because there are plenty of things that I didn't include in here, but I think it's important, at least when you're looking through all of the photos, is to notice which pieces of the trend have continued on throughout history, whether they are reinterpreted or a modern version like the peacoat becoming a cropped angular version in the early 2010s, and the square flap collar carrying on throughout history and being reinterpreted in a cropped sweater because we are very into crop sweaters and high-waisted pants these days. Thanks for being here for my YouTube debut. I will be back with tons more fashion history and random pop culture chit chat, I'm sure. If you have any requests, please let me know. I'll see you soon.